I woke up shivering as water dripped onto my cot in the garage. For 30 years, I maintained this house my late husband Frank built with his own hands. Now my son Bradley and his wife Vanessa had converted my bedroom into her walk-in closet. 3 months I'd slept surrounded by tools and motor oil. That morning, without a word, I shuffled to the filing cabinet in the basement. The yellow house deed felt warm in my hands. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, subscribe now for more stories about reclaiming your power after betrayal. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Take a moment to like and subscribe to my channel if you believe everyone deserves dignity in their own home. Your support helps share these important lessons about standing up for yourself when family lets you down. After 40 years teaching 3rd grade at Lincoln Elementary, I thought I understood what retirement would look like. Frank and I had plans for an Alaskan cruise, weekly bridge games at the community center, and finally planting that vegetable garden we'd always talked about. We'd worked hard to pay off our mortgage by 2005, 15 years ahead of schedule. Our modest 2-story colonial wasn't fancy, but every squeaky floorboard and slightly crooked doorframe told the story of our life together. Then Frank got sick. Pancreatic cancer. 3 years of hospital visits, chemotherapy sessions, and watching my strong husband fade away. I became his full-time caregiver, administering medications, changing bedding, and trying to make him comfortable. On his last night he squeezed my hand and whispered, "Martha, you're the strongest woman I've ever known. Never let anyone take that from you." Bradley hadn't always been close with his father. When Frank was deployed overseas for 3 years during Bradley's childhood, I became both mother and father. I attended every baseball game, helped with science fair projects, and worked extra tutoring jobs to make sure Bradley had the same opportunities as his friends with 2 parents at home. Those years were exhausting but shaped an unbreakable bond between us. Or so I thought. When Bradley met Vanessa at a company party 5 years ago, I was thrilled. She seemed kind and attentive, asking about family recipes and listening to my stories about Bradley's childhood antics. Their wedding was small but beautiful, and I cried when Bradley thanked me in his speech for being the foundation of our family. After Frank passed, the house felt cavernous. I'd walk from room to room, talking to Frank's photographs, forgetting for brief moments that he was gone. Bradley started visiting more often, sometimes bringing dinner or helping with yard work. During one of these visits, he broached the subject that would change everything. "Mom, this house is too big for you alone," he said, fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Vanessa and I were thinking, what if you moved in with us? We could combine resources, save on bills. I hesitated. My independence had always been important to me, but the thought of company during those long, quiet evenings was tempting. "We're renting that tiny apartment downtown," Bradley continued. "With your house, we'd all have more space. And honestly, Mom, I worry about you here by yourself." "I don't know, Bradley," I said. "This is my home. Your father and I built our life here." He put down the wrench and took my hands in his. "Mom, this will always be your home too. I promise. You'll have your room just as it is now, and we'll take care of the maintenance you've been struggling with." After 2 weeks of consideration and conversations with my closest friend Eleanor, I agreed. We drew up paperwork with Bradley's name on the deed, though I never thought I'd need legal protection from my own son. I kept a life estate provision at Eleanor's insistence, but never mentioned it to Bradley. It didn't seem necessary. I sold most of my furniture at a garage sale but kept my bedroom set, the cherrywood dresser, nightstand, and 4-poster bed my parents had given Frank and me as a wedding present. Those pieces had traveled with us through 3 states and 7 homes before settling in this one. The first few months were pleasant. Sunday family dinners became a tradition, with Bradley grilling on the patio while Vanessa and I prepared sides in the kitchen. I taught her my secret recipe for peach cobbler, and she showed me how to use Instagram to follow my former students' lives. I contributed to household expenses, paying for groceries and utilities despite Bradley's protests that it wasn't necessary. Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs. Vanessa's comments about my cooking became more frequent. "Do you always use this much butter?" Or Bradley's trying to cut down on carbs. She would sigh when I watched my mystery shows in the evening, or ask if I really needed to have my church friends over for coffee on Wednesday mornings. I made adjustments. I started watching TV in my room instead of the living room. I kept my voice down during phone calls. I reorganized my toiletries to take up less space in the shared bathroom. Each small compromise seemed reasonable at the time, a minor adjustment to living with others after so many years on my own. I didn't realize I was setting a pattern that would eventually erase me from my own home. 6 months after I moved in with Bradley and Vanessa, my son received a significant promotion at his architectural firm. His new position came with more responsibility and longer hours. Suddenly, he was leaving before dawn and returning after I'd gone to bed. This left Vanessa and me alone together for much of the day. Without Bradley as a buffer, Vanessa's true feelings surfaced quickly. She stopped pretending to enjoy our cooking sessions. When I'd enter a room, her smile would drop and her tone would turn clipped and businesslike. She began inviting her friends over without telling me, and I'd find myself unexpectedly surrounded by young women who fell silent when I appeared. One afternoon, I was reading in my room when I overheard Vanessa in the kitchen with her friend Stephanie. "I can't believe you're living with his mother," Stephanie said, not bothering to lower her voice. "Tell me about it," Vanessa replied. "It's like having a permanent babysitter who needs babysitting herself. She's always there, watching everything I do. Can't you talk to Bradley about finding her a nice retirement community or something? I'm working on it, but he feels guilty because his dad died. It's complicated." I sat frozen, my book forgotten in my lap. I'd been so careful to give them space, to not be a burden. Hearing myself described as an unwanted obligation stung more than I could have imagined. The following week, Vanessa's parents visited for dinner. Richard and Susan Montgomery lived in an exclusive neighborhood across town, and had never approved of their daughter marrying down. Richard was a surgeon, and Susan spent her days planning charity events and getting cosmetic procedures. Throughout dinner, they made subtle comments about the house's potential, and how much Vanessa had sacrificed by moving in. "You know," Susan said, swirling her wine, "Vanessa had her own walk-in closet growing up. Remember that, darling? Custom built with the cedar lining." "Hard to forget," Richard laughed. "Cost me a small fortune." Vanessa smiled tightly. "Well, space is at a premium here. Right, Bradley?" That's when Bradley cleared his throat and turned to me. "Actually, Mom, we've been meaning to talk to you about something." The room fell silent as everyone looked at me. I set down my fork. "Vanessa and I are thinking about doing some renovations," Bradley continued. "We'd like to convert the master bedroom into a proper suite, which means we'd need to reorganize a bit." "Reorganize?" I repeated. "We were hoping you might be willing to move to the guest room temporarily," Vanessa jumped in. "Just for a few weeks during construction." I looked around at their expectant faces. Even though I'd been excluded from these plans for my own home, I didn't want to cause tension. I suppose that would be all right for a little while. "You're a doll," Susan said, patting my hand condescendingly. The next day, Bradley helped me pack up my bedroom. Each photograph I removed from the wall felt like peeling away a layer of my identity. The picture of Frank and me on our honeymoon in Niagara Falls. Bradley's kindergarten graduation. The 4 generations of women in my family, from my grandmother to my niece Melissa. "Where should I put these?" I asked, holding the stack of framed memories. Bradley looked uncertain. "Maybe just keep out your favorites for now? We can store the rest in the attic until the renovations are done." I nodded, selecting 3 photos to keep on my nightstand in the guest room, which was half the size of my former space and overlooked the neighbor's vinyl siding instead of my beloved garden. Still, I tried to stay positive. The guest room had its own charm with its blue walls and cozy reading nook. At least I still had a nice room. As weeks passed, I found myself increasingly excluded from family life. Bradley and Vanessa began eating dinner later, after I'd typically gone to bed. Weekend brunches, once a happy tradition, were replaced with their outings with friends. When I suggested activities, there was always an excuse. Still, I continued contributing financially. I paid for a new refrigerator when the old one broke down. I covered the property taxes that year as a gift, to help with Bradley's promotion celebration. I never asked for receipts or reimbursements, trusting that my contributions were appreciated. During our weekly coffee date, Eleanor expressed concern. Martha, are you sure everything's okay at home? You seem diminished somehow. Bradley's just busy with work, I defended. And Vanessa's adjusting to managing a household. They're young. They're not that young, Eleanor said pointedly. Bradley's 35 and perfectly capable of treating his mother with respect. He's trying to please his new wife, I said, the excuse sounding weak even to my own ears. It's a delicate balance. The renovations that were supposed to take a few weeks stretched into months. During this time, I noticed items disappearing from the attic where my things were stored. When I mentioned missing my photo albums from the 1980s, Bradley looked confused. Vanessa organized the attic last weekend. Let me ask her. Later, he returned with only 2 of the 5 albums I'd mentioned. She must have put them somewhere else. We'll keep looking. I never saw the other albums again. 8 months after moving to the guest room, I came home from grocery shopping to find Bradley and Vanessa sitting at the kitchen table, looking serious. My heart dropped as I set down the bags. Mom, we need to talk, Bradley said, not meeting my eyes. Vanessa straightened the placemats, a nervous habit I'd noticed when she was about to say something unpleasant. We've decided to do a complete renovation of the upstairs. The whole upstairs? I asked, confused. I thought the master suite was already finished. It is, Bradley said quickly. But we want to extend my home office and create a proper guest room for when Vanessa's parents visit. I stood very still, processing his words. But I'm in the guest room. That's what we need to discuss, Vanessa said, her voice artificially bright. We think you might be more comfortable with your own space. Somewhere with more privacy. My own space. I repeated. Bradley stood up and gestured for me to follow him. We walked through the kitchen, past the laundry room, and into the attached garage. In the far corner, partially hidden by storage boxes, was a folding screen. Bradley walked over and moved it aside to reveal what looked like an attempt at a makeshift bedroom. There was a fold-out cot with a thin mattress, a small space heater, a lamp clamped to a nearby shelf, and a plastic set of drawers. A shower curtain hung from a rod created a small bathroom area containing a portable toilet and a plastic basin. We thought this would give you independence, Bradley explained, not quite meeting my eyes. You won't have to worry about disturbing us when you get up early, and you'll have direct access to the driveway for your car. I stood speechless, taking in the concrete floor, the exposed insulation, the complete lack of windows. It's just temporary, Bradley added quickly, until we figure out something more permanent. Like what? I finally managed to ask. Vanessa appeared behind us. We've been looking into some really nice senior communities. The one by the lake has activities and a shuttle bus to the grocery store. I couldn't formulate a response. This garage had never been intended for human habitation. In summer it became an oven. In winter a freezer. The air was thick with the smell of motor oil and garden chemicals. When would I need to move? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. The contractors start Monday, Bradley said. So this weekend would be ideal. That Saturday, I watched as Bradley moved my bed and dresser into the garage. The beautiful cherry wood looked absurdly out of place against the pegboard wall where tools usually hung. My clothes barely fit in the plastic drawers, so most remained in suitcases stacked beside the cot. That first night in the garage, I lay awake listening to the house settling above me, the occasional scurry of mice in the walls, the hum of the refrigerator on the other side of the door. I pulled my late husband's sweater tighter around me despite the space heater's efforts. Frank, I whispered to the darkness, what would you do? The first week was the hardest adjustment. Using the portable toilet in the middle of the night was humiliating, especially when it needed emptying. The lack of running water meant carrying bottles back and forth from the kitchen for drinking and washing. Showering required coordinating with Vanessa's schedule to use the main bathroom, which increasingly seemed to be occupied whenever I tried. My neighbor Patricia noticed me washing my face with the garden hose one morning. Martha? Is everything all right? She called over the fence. I straightened up, forcing a smile. Oh, just cleaning up after some gardening. Her husband Gerald appeared beside her, frowning. We haven't seen you coming and going from the front door lately. I'm using the side entrance now, I explained vaguely. Through the garage. It's more convenient. Their concerned looks made my cheeks burn with shame. I quickly excused myself and retreated to my garage corner, where I sat on the edge of my cot and fought back tears. As the weeks passed, I developed a persistent cough from the dust and poor ventilation. My arthritis flared up from the cold, making my morning routine painful and slow. Yet I continued cooking and cleaning for the household, determined to prove my worth and hoping my son would come to his senses. Bradley's visits to check on me became less frequent. Sometimes days would pass without him coming into the garage at all. When he did, he would stand awkwardly by the door, making small talk about the weather or asking if I needed anything from the store. "Is the heater working okay?" he'd ask, glancing at his watch. "It's fine," I'd lie, not mentioning how I could see my breath on cold mornings or that I wore 3 layers to bed. One afternoon, I was bringing in clean laundry when I heard unfamiliar voices in the living room. I paused at the door between the garage and kitchen, laundry basket balanced on my hip. "And this is the expanded living area," Vanessa was saying. "We knocked down that wall to create the open concept flow." "It's gorgeous," a woman responded. "So much brighter than before." "Wait until you see what we did upstairs," Vanessa continued. "The master suite is completely transformed, and Bradley's office has the most amazing built-ins." I set down the laundry and followed the voices, curious about these renovations I'd never been shown. In the living room stood Vanessa with 3 women I recognized as her friends from the country club. "Oh," Vanessa said, noticing me. "Everyone, this is Bradley's mother. She's staying with us temporarily." The women smiled politely, but I could see the questions in their eyes. What was this disheveled old woman doing in this stylish home? I suddenly became aware of my appearance. Faded house dress, hair uncombed, hands raw from hand-washing clothes in cold water. "Just dropping off some laundry," I mumbled, backing toward the garage door. "We're about to see the upstairs," one of the women said kindly. "Would you like to join us?" Before I could answer, Vanessa interjected. "Actually, we're on a tight schedule. Rain check." As I retreated to the garage, I heard one friend whisper, "I didn't know she lived here too." "Like I said," Vanessa replied, voice lowered but still audible, "it's temporary." That night, sitting on my cot, eating a sandwich I'd made rather than joining them for dinner, I realized with painful clarity that I had become invisible in my own home. By my 3rd month in the garage, my health had deteriorated noticeably. The persistent cough had deepened into my chest. My joints ached constantly from the dampness. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by every house creak and neighborhood noise. My 65th birthday arrived on a Tuesday in November. I woke up hoping for some acknowledgement, perhaps an invitation back into the house for dinner or cake. Around noon, Bradley appeared at the garage door, holding a card. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a generic birthday card with both their signatures, but no personal message. The receipt was still in the envelope, showing it had been purchased that morning at the gas station. "Thank you," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Sorry I can't stay," Bradley said, already backing toward the door. "Big client meeting. Maybe we can do something this weekend." We both knew it wouldn't happen. The previous 3 weekends had featured similar promises, all broken for various emergencies. Later that afternoon, while Bradley and Vanessa were both at work, I went inside to do some laundry. I decided to check on my old bedroom, wondering if the renovations were complete, and if perhaps I might be allowed to move back in soon. What I found stopped me cold in the doorway. My bedroom, the room where Frank and I had spent countless nights talking about our dreams, where I'd nursed Bradley through childhood fevers, had been transformed into an enormous closet. Custom shelving lined every wall, displaying hundreds of shoes, handbags, and clothing items arranged by color. A crystal chandelier hung where my ceiling fan had been. In the center stood a tufted velvet ottoman, and a full-length mirror framed in gold. My beautiful cherrywood furniture was nowhere to be seen. Later, I would discover pieces of it in the trash behind the house, apparently deemed too old-fashioned for Vanessa's tastes. I stood frozen, unable to process the complete erasure of my space. This wasn't a temporary arrangement while renovations were completed. This was my permanent removal from the house. As I stood there, I heard Vanessa's voice coming from the master bedroom. She must have come home early. I moved quietly toward the sound, not wanting to be caught snooping. I know, Mom, Vanessa was saying into her phone. We're working on it. There's a waiting list at Sunny Pines, but they think a space might open up next month. I pressed myself against the wall, listening. No, she has no idea. Bradley's going to present it as a trial stay, see if she likes it. Once she's there, we'll gradually move her things over. Yes, I know it's expensive, but we can sell some of her stuff to cover the first few months, until she signs over her pension. My heart pounded in my chest. They were planning to put me in a nursing home and take my teacher's pension. Well, she's not using it anyway, Vanessa continued with a laugh. She's literally living in a garage. Trust me, Sunny Pines will be an upgrade. I retreated silently back to the garage, my mind racing. That evening, I searched through some boxes Bradley had stored near my makeshift room and found financial documents I hadn't seen before. Bank statements showed large withdrawals from an account that had both our names on it, the joint account I'd set up to help with household expenses. The money had gone to Montgomery Interiors, Vanessa's parents' design company. They had been using my money to fund the renovations that had pushed me into the garage. The next morning, while reaching for a sweater in my plastic drawers, I noticed something glinting at the bottom. It was my mother's sapphire earrings, or rather, one of them. I distinctly remembered packing these with my important jewelry in a special box, which I'd last seen in my bedroom closet before moving to the guest room. I went into the house, determined to find the missing earring. As I passed the kitchen, I noticed Vanessa at the table, sorting through mail. She was wearing a necklace I recognized immediately. My mother's pendant that matched the earrings. That's my mother's, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Vanessa looked up, startled. What? The necklace. It was my mother's. It goes with these earrings. I held up the single earring I'd found. Her hand went to the pendant. Bradley said I could borrow it. For a work event. I need it back, please. And I'm missing the other earring. Vanessa's expression hardened. I don't have your earring. Maybe you misplaced it. You've been forgetting a lot of things lately. I haven't been forgetting anything, I said, my voice rising slightly. My things keep disappearing. Bradley walked in, catching the end of our conversation. Everything okay? Your mother is confused again, Vanessa said quickly. She thinks I took her jewelry. You are wearing my mother's necklace, I pointed out. Bradley sighed. Mom, we discussed this. I told Vanessa she could borrow it for her fundraiser. Don't you remember? We had never had such a conversation. I could feel them creating an alternate reality where I was becoming forgetful, confused, a burden. It was subtle gaslighting, making me question my own memories. I need to lie down, I said, retreating once more to the garage. 2 days later, I fainted while trying to clean mold from my corner of the garage. Miguel, the gardener who came weekly to maintain the yard, found me on the concrete floor and called an ambulance despite my protests. At the hospital, a doctor named Raymond examined me with concern. Mrs. Reynolds, you have pneumonia and severe dehydration, he explained. Can you tell me about your living conditions? I hesitated, embarrassed to admit the truth. I live with my son and daughter-in-law. And do you have your own room there? When I didn't answer immediately, he pressed gently. Mrs. Reynolds, I'm concerned about the contributing factors to your condition. I broke down then, telling him about the garage, the portable toilet, the space heater that did little against the winter chill. Dr. Raymond's face darkened. I'm going to have our social worker come speak with you. The social worker, Evelyn Torres, was kind but direct. Mrs. Reynolds, what you're describing could be considered elder abuse. There are resources available to help you. No, I said quickly. My son isn't abusive. He's just trying to please his wife. By making his mother live in a garage? Evelyn asked gently. Would you have ever treated him that way? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. I was kept in the hospital for 3 days. Bradley visited once, bringing flowers but no offer to improve my living situation. When I was discharged, I returned to the garage, now equipped with antibiotics and an inhaler. What I found there broke something inside me. My cot had been pushed against the wall to make room for Bradley's fishing boat. My few belongings were piled haphazardly in a corner. The space heater was unplugged, the cord wrapped neatly around it as if it had been prepared for storage. I stood staring at this final indignity when Patricia appeared at the side door. "Martha? Are you okay? Gerald and I saw the ambulance the other day." "I'm fine," I said automatically. She stepped into the garage, her eyes widening as she took in my living arrangement. "Oh my God, Martha. You're living out here? In November?" I couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. "Yes," I whispered. Patricia put her arm around me, leading me toward her house. "Come with me right now. This isn't right." But what finally broke me completely happened the following weekend. While Bradley and Vanessa were out, I ventured into the house to make a cup of tea. Glancing out the front window, I noticed a small crowd on our lawn around a card table. Curious, I went outside to find Vanessa's mother Susan presiding over what appeared to be a yard sale. On the table were items I recognized immediately: Frank's military medals and uniform, his service revolver, the flag that had draped his coffin, all being sold for pocket change to strangers. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Susan looked up, surprised. "Oh, Martha. Just clearing out some clutter from the attic. No one was using these things." I picked up Frank's purple heart, clutching it to my chest. "These are my husband's military honors. They're not clutter." "Well, Vanessa needed to make space for the holiday decorations," Susan said dismissively. "And honestly, they were just collecting dust." I gathered as many of Frank's items as I could carry, ignoring Susan's protests. As I turned to go back inside, I saw Vanessa and Bradley pulling into the driveway. The look of guilt on my son's face told me everything I needed to know. He had authorized this sale. He had allowed his wife to sell his father's medals for pocket money. In that moment, something inside me hardened into resolve. Frank's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, "Never let anyone take your dignity, Martha." I walked past them without a word, carrying the rescued items back to my garage. That night, as I polished Frank's medals by the weak light of my lamp, I made my decision. I would not confront them. I would not beg. I would simply leave, taking with me the last thing they hadn't yet managed to steal: my self-respect. That night in the garage, surrounded by the few remaining treasures from my past life, I sat on my cot and truly allowed myself to feel everything I'd been suppressing. Anger at the betrayal, grief for the son I thought I knew, shame at having allowed myself to be gradually erased from my own home. I remembered Frank's words on his deathbed, "Never let anyone take your dignity." I hadn't protected it very well, had I? But it wasn't too late. The next morning, I called my old friend Gloria Simmons. We'd been in the same teaching cohort years ago before she left education to pursue law. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood, where there was no chance of running into Vanessa or her friends. Gloria was shocked when I related the events of the past year, her expression changing from surprise to horror to anger. "Martha, this is elder abuse, plain and simple," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "And legally, you have options they don't know about." "What do you mean?" I asked. "That deed transfer to Bradley. I remember helping you with the paperwork. We included a life estate provision, remember? You still have the legal right to live in that house for the rest of your life. They can't put you in the garage or force you into a retirement home." I vaguely recalled signing those papers, more focused at the time on making Bradley happy than protecting myself. "So what does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means the house is still legally yours to live in. Bradley owns it on paper, but you have lifetime rights to reside there. He can't sell it without your permission, and he certainly can't relegate you to the garage." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. But I also felt something else. A determination to handle this my way, with dignity rather than confrontation. "I don't want to fight them, Gloria," I said. "I just want to leave with my head held high." "Are you sure? We could file for elder abuse. Get a court order." I shook my head. "Bradley is still my son. I won't drag him through court. But I do want to protect myself going forward." Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly laid the groundwork for my departure. I spent afternoons at the public library researching elder rights and financial protection. The librarian, Claire, noticed my interest and directed me to additional resources. When I explained my situation in the vaguest terms, She connected me with a local elder advocacy group. My mother went through something similar with my brother, Claire confided. It's more common than people realize. I met with financial advisor Thomas Wright to secure my accounts. He helped me open a new bank account at a different institution and arranged for my pension and Social Security to be redirected there. We should also put a freeze on your credit, Thomas suggested. Just as a precaution. I nodded, thinking of the joint account Bradley had already drained. Let's do that. Eleanor, true to our 40 years of friendship, offered her spare bedroom without hesitation. Stay as long as you need, she insisted. My house is too big for just me anyway. My neighbor Patricia, who had been quietly observing my garage living situation, offered to document the conditions with photographs. Just in case, she said, her expression grim as she captured images of the portable toilet, the inadequate heating, the water leaking through the roof onto my bed. Gerald, her husband, helped me secretly move some of my most precious remaining items to Eleanor's house when Bradley and Vanessa were at work. This isn't right, Martha, he muttered as we loaded photo albums and Frank's military shadow box into his truck. Not right at all. At night, alone in the garage, I would remember how Frank had taught me to stand up for myself years ago, when a school principal had tried to bully me into changing a student's grade. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard, Frank had said. Sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. I made a careful inventory of everything that had been taken or sold without my permission. My jewelry, Frank's military items, family photographs, heirloom furniture. Not for restitution but for my own peace of mind. I needed to acknowledge what had been lost before I could move forward. I created a timeline of how my living situation had deteriorated, from my comfortable bedroom to the garage corner. Seeing it laid out chronologically helped me understand how gradually the erosion had happened, how each small compromise had led to the next until I found myself effectively homeless in my own home. Eleanor helped me practice what I might say if confronted. You don't owe them explanations, she reminded me. You've given enough already. As my plans solidified, I realized that I didn't need a dramatic confrontation or a legal battle. Frank had always valued quiet dignity over scenes and accusations. I don't need to fight, I told Eleanor one evening. I just need to leave. My final preparation was psychological. I spent an evening in the garage looking through old photographs of Bradley, his first steps, little league games, high school graduation. I allowed myself to grieve for the relationship we'd had and acknowledged that it might never be the same again. But I also reminded myself that my worth wasn't determined by how my son treated me. I had been Martha Reynolds before I was Bradley's mother, and I would continue to be Martha Reynolds after I left this garage. The last piece fell into place when I remembered Frank's old filing cabinet in the basement. Bradley had moved it down there during the renovations, assuming it contained only old tax returns and house maintenance records. But Frank had been meticulous about our important documents, including the original deed to the house with my life estate provision clearly stated. If it was still there, it would be the final confirmation I needed. I chose my moment carefully. Bradley and Vanessa had planned a weekend trip to visit her parents, something they did monthly. They would leave Friday afternoon and return Sunday evening, giving me plenty of time. As soon as their car pulled out of the driveway, I went into action. First, I gathered my remaining personal items from the garage: clothes, toiletries, medications, and the few mementos I'd managed to keep out of Vanessa's yard sales. These I packed into 2 suitcases and a tote bag. Then I entered the house, walking through each room slowly, taking mental photographs. The living room where Frank and I had watched countless movies. The kitchen where I'd taught Bradley to make his grandmother's chocolate chip cookies. The dining room where we'd celebrated Thanksgivings and birthdays and Bradley's college acceptance. Upstairs, I paused at the door of my former bedroom, now Vanessa's closet. The space felt foreign now, stripped of all traces of my existence. The walls had been repainted from the soft yellow Frank, and I had chosen to a stark white. The hardwood floors where Bradley had taken his first steps were covered with plush white carpet. I continued to the attic, searching for any overlooked treasures among the boxes. I found a few photographs Bradley had missed, including one of Frank in his dress uniform that brought tears to my eyes. The basement was my final stop. Frank's filing cabinet stood in the corner, partially hidden behind holiday decorations. I pulled open the drawers one by one, flipping through folders labeled with Frank's neat handwriting. Taxes 1990 to 1995, appliance warranties, home improvements. In the bottom drawer, in a folder marked property, I found what I was looking for. The original deed to our home, with the life estate provision Gloria had mentioned. I also found the mortgage satisfaction letter from 2005 when we'd made our final payment, 5 years after Bradley had left for college. Frank and I had sacrificed vacations and new cars to pay off our home early, dreaming of a secure retirement together. I placed these documents in my tote bag and returned to the kitchen. There, I wrote a simple note on the magnetic pad we kept on the refrigerator. I've gone to stay with Eleanor. The garage leaked again.
No acquiescens. No explanations.
Just the simple truth. Gerald was waiting outside with his truck as arranged. He loaded my suitcases without comment, his usual jovial expression replaced with concern. You sure about this, Martha? He asked as I closed the garage door for the last time. I'm sure, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Before getting into Gerald's truck, I took one final walk around the exterior of the house. I touched the oak tree Frank had planted when we first moved in, now tall and strong. I ran my fingers along the brick pathway we'd laid together one hot summer weekend. I said goodbye to the rosebushes I'd nurtured for decades. As we drove away, I didn't look back. I'd already memorized every inch of the home we'd built. No one could take those memories from me. Eleanor was waiting at her front door, arms open. Welcome home, she said simply. That first night away from the garage, sleeping in a real bed in a warm room with actual windows, I broke down completely. Years of suppressed emotion poured out as Eleanor held my hand and passed me tissues. I failed him, I sobbed. Frank would be so disappointed in how I let myself be treated. No, Eleanor said firmly. Frank would be proud of you for leaving with dignity. And he'd be furious with Bradley. The next evening, my phone exploded with notifications. Bradley had returned home early and found me gone. Mom, where are you? Call me ASAP. Mom, I'm worried. Please answer your phone. This isn't funny, Mom. Vanessa is upset. I silenced my phone and handed it to Eleanor. I'm not ready, I explained. The following day, Gloria called to inform me that Bradley had contacted her, frantically trying to locate me. I didn't tell him you'd consulted me, she assured me. But he mentioned something interesting. Apparently, they came home early because Vanessa's parents offered to help them look at retirement communities for you. He seemed genuinely confused that you weren't waiting gratefully in the garage. What did you tell him? I asked. That I couldn't help him. But Martha, he's going to figure out where you are eventually. Do you want me to send him the documentation about your life estate now, or wait? I considered this. Send it. But through certified mail, not in person. I don't want a confrontation. 3 days later, Bradley received Gloria's letter containing copies of the deed with my life estate provision highlighted, along with a concise explanation of my legal right to occupy the house. Gloria also included information about elder abuse laws, and a formal request that my remaining property be preserved until arrangements could be made for its retrieval. Bradley's reaction was immediate. He called Eleanor's house repeatedly until she finally answered. She doesn't want to talk right now, Eleanor told him. This is ridiculous. I could hear him saying through the phone. She's my mother. Put her on. That's exactly right, Eleanor replied coolly. She's your mother. Not your tenant. Not your inconvenience. Your mother. When he finally reached me the following day, his tone had shifted from indignation to panic. Mom, there's been a huge misunderstanding, he began. We never meant for the garage to be permanent. We were looking at really nice senior places, with activities and people your age. I know, I said quietly. I overheard Vanessa talking about selling my things to pay for it. There was a long silence. That wasn't. She didn't mean. It doesn't matter now, Bradley. I've made other arrangements. But Mom, the house. Gloria sent some paperwork. There's some kind of mistake. No mistake, I said. I have the right to live in that house until I die. It was in the deed transfer you signed. But that's not what we agreed to. Isn't it? You promised me I would always have a home there. Instead, you put me in the garage and planned to send me away. His voice cracked. I was just trying to make everyone happy. Everyone except me, I said, the truth of it settling heavily between us. Vanessa's parents became involved the following week, calling with offers to smooth things over. Richard Montgomery suggested I might have misinterpreted the garage situation. Susan implied that my memory might be failing. I listened politely, then declined their assistance. As word spread through our community, I was surprised by the support that materialized. Former students brought meals to Eleanor's house. Church members offered transportation and legal advice. Even the barista at my regular coffee shop, upon hearing fragments of the story, refused to accept payment for my drinks, saying simply, "My grandmother went through something similar." Through it all, I maintained my resolve. No public accusations, no legal battle unless absolutely necessary, no burning of bridges that might someday need crossing. 3 months after leaving the garage, I was settled in a one-bedroom apartment in Riverside Gardens, a modest senior community overlooking the park where I'd once pushed Bradley on the swings. My new home was small but bright, with large windows and a balcony just big enough for a chair and several potted herbs. The legal resolution had been surprisingly straightforward. After consulting with Gloria, I decided to sell the house. Bradley and Vanessa were given 30 days to either vacate or begin paying market-rate rent to me as the life estate holder. They chose to leave, purchasing a smaller house across town with help from Vanessa's parents. From the proceeds of the sale, I donated $10,000 to Elder Voice, an advocacy organization for seniors facing housing insecurity or family abuse. The rest provided me with financial security I hadn't felt since Frank was alive. One unexpected joy in this new chapter was reconnecting with Bradley's sister Melissa. She had moved to Colorado years ago and had been told by Bradley that I was doing fine whenever she called. When she learned the truth, she flew back immediately. "I had no idea," she kept saying, holding my hands across the table at our reunion lunch. "He told me you were happy living with them, that they were taking good care of you." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "I didn't tell anyone for a long time either." My new community expanded beyond family. I joined a book club at the library where Claire, the helpful librarian, had become a friend. I volunteered 2 mornings a week at Lincoln Elementary, my old school, helping children with reading difficulties. My health improved dramatically once I was living in a clean, warm environment with proper facilities. I was selecting tomato plants at the garden center when I literally bumped carts with Bradley. We both froze, startled by the unexpected encounter. "Mom," he said, his face a mixture of emotions. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied. "I am well." We stood awkwardly among the seedlings and potting soil. Bradley had lost weight, and his usually clean-shaven face sported a short beard. "I've been trying to call you," he said finally. "I know. I needed some time." He nodded, looking down at his cart. "I understand. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. I should have protected you, not." His voice trailed off. "Not put me in the garage?" I finished gently. He winced. "I keep trying to understand how I let things get to that point. Dad would have been so ashamed of me. We all make mistakes, Bradley. Not like this. I betrayed the person who sacrificed everything for me." He looked up, his eyes wet. "I found some of your things in the attic after you left. Things Vanessa said were donated or lost. I'd like to return them to you." "I'd appreciate that," I said. As we parted ways, he hesitated. "Mom? Melissa's coming to visit next month. Maybe we could all have dinner? If you're comfortable with that." "I'd like that," I said, surprised to find I meant it. 2 weeks later, a box arrived containing my mother's missing jewelry, some family photographs I'd thought were lost forever, and Frank's service medals Vanessa hadn't managed to sell. Each item was carefully wrapped with a note of provenance in Bradley's handwriting. I learned through Melissa that Vanessa's parents had separated shortly after our situation became public knowledge. Apparently, Richard had recognized similar controlling patterns in his wife's treatment of him and sought therapy, which led to his decision to end their marriage. Susan, meanwhile, had been quietly ostracized from her social circles once the story of my garage accommodation circulated. As for Vanessa, she and Bradley were in counseling, according to Melissa. He finally stood up to her about something, Melissa reported. Said he wouldn't lose his mother the way he'd lost his father. My own healing came through unexpected channels. I started a small support group for seniors facing family housing issues, which met monthly in the community room of my apartment building. Sharing my story helped others recognize warning signs in their own situations. I received a letter from Jessica, a young neighbor from my old street, thanking me for the example I'd set. My grandmother was being treated similarly by my uncle, she wrote. Seeing you stand up for yourself gave me the courage to help her do the same. My balcony garden became a symbol of my new growth. Each plant represented something I was cultivating in my new life. Resilience, community, joy, peace. I would sit among my herbs and flowers in the evening, watching the sunset, and feel a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. By Thanksgiving, I felt ready to host a small gathering in my apartment. Eleanor came, of course, along with Melissa and her husband. Patricia and Gerald drove down from the old neighborhood. Gloria brought her famous pecan pie. Claire from the library arrived with a bottle of sparkling cider, and her teenage daughter. As we crowded around my small table, passing dishes and sharing stories, I looked at these people who had become my chosen family. None of them had been obligated to help me, yet each had offered support without hesitation. Bradley wasn't there. We weren't quite ready for that yet, but he had called that morning to wish me happy Thanksgiving, a small step toward whatever our future relationship might become. After everyone had gone, I sat on my balcony wrapped in one of Frank's old sweaters. I did it, I whispered to the stars. I found my dignity again. The journey from garage to self-respect had been painful but necessary. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't require accepting further abuse. That family isn't just about blood, but about who treats you with love and respect. That it's never too late to stand up for yourself, even when doing so means walking away. Most importantly, I learned that by valuing myself enough to leave that garage, I had opened the door for healing, not just for me, but for Bradley, for Melissa, even for Vanessa in her own way. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is to refuse to participate in a harmful dynamic, creating space for everyone to grow into better versions of themselves. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and self-respect? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to make a change. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating complex family dynamics with dignity. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late to reclaim your worth and build the life you deserve.